A frantic father calls 911, yelling how his 14-month-old son wasn't breathing. The boy somehow got outside and fell in the pool. At minimum, he was underwater for a few minutes. I try my best to calm the father enough to start compressions. I start giving CPR instructions over the phone. One of our officers gets there and takes over CPR. The fire department gets there shortly after. I'd done CPR over a dozen times as a former EMT and a few over the phone, but never for a child as young as this kid. I couldn't hang up. The father left the line open, and I kept listening. I heard the compressions, the life pack charging up, the shock, and then silence. After a few minutes, they load and go, and I hear the parents crying, blaming themselves for killing their own baby. The medics were able to get a pulse just before calling it. The neonatal intensive care unit tried their best, but the child passed 24 hours later. I did 3 years behind the phone and never had a call hit me so hard. I took my break early that night and went back to work. I got a call from a guy, saying he was sitting in his car with a shotgun, and was going to kill himself. He seemed very calm, and I could tell in his voice that he had made up his mind, and this was not a cry for help like most of the other suicide calls I receive. He told me he was at one of our train stations, but wouldn't tell me which one. So while I had officers out looking for him, I made small talk with him about his family and sports. I even had him laugh a few times. After about 10 minutes of talking, and me thinking I've made progress, he finally says, "Well, it's been nice talking to you, but I gotta get going." He then proceeded to put the gun in his mouth and pull the trigger. I heard his death gurgles. I got a call from a young man, identified himself as 21 years old. He said he went on a hike with his best friend. This is where it got weird. I asked for his location, and it was 50 miles from the nearest trailhead, but not in the direction the trails move. I asked him to tell me what the problem was and what services he needed. That's when he burst into tears, saying one moment his friend was in front of him, and the next he was gone. I dispatched a sheriff, and was told neither men were ever found. Still freaks me out. One of my worst calls was from a little boy. I think he was 5. He was hiding in his closet because his dad was drunk and beating the living daylights out of his mom. He lived in a very rural area, and it was about an hour drive from the nearest police detachment. I stayed on the phone with him for almost 45 minutes trying to keep him calm. Side note, the guys drive fast when there are kids involved. We literally talked about anything that popped up into my head. The weather, favorite TV shows, what his favorite toys were. All the while I can plainly hear a woman screaming and crying in the background, and as the calls goes on you can still hear the guy beating her, but her screams turn into grunts and moans. You can't tune it out, because you are constantly typing what you hear. Any details you can get from background noise is valuable to the officers attending. Anyway, the members arrived, and arrested the man. I hung up once they had the kid safe. And then the phone rang again, because there is no stopping. There is no time to process what just happened, and honestly, it's probably for the best. A lot of the time you don't find out the outcome of the call, because as I said, there are always more phones ringing. I was working a minor traffic accident involving a pregnant female. I had to call her husband to come and get her, because her vehicle was not drivable. Officers were with her, EMS and fire. She was in no danger whatsoever. When I called to let him know, he started freaking out. He would not listen to me that she was okay. I explained she was just waiting in a parking lot in the back of the ambulance. She simply needed a ride home. I did my best to get him to calm down and told him where to meet officers. Maybe 15 minutes later, we get a call. There was a rollover accident on the highway from some sedan speeding down the road, weaving in and out of traffic. Medics and officers get there and do the best they can. The single male driver of the sedan was dead on the scene due to injuries. Needless to say, it was the husband of the lady waiting for a ride home. The moral of the story: slow down and think before operating a 2,000-pound death machine. The worst call I've ever had was really a series of calls. We took a couple calls about a domestic at an apartment building. The normal he said she said stuff. They get out there and the lady was moving out into a new place and he was upset about it. Police ask him to leave and he does. Evidently after he leaves, she calls him to talk. Fast forward a few minutes and the guy from the domestic calls us. He says he was talking to his ex-wife when he heard a gunshot and the line went dead. He thinks his wife shot herself, so we get police and everyone rolling back that way. They get there and she's fine, nothing wrong, but she did hear a loud noise. As soon as they relay that to us, I get the call. 2 townhouses down, while all that was going on, a mom walked into a bathroom and found her son, just after he shot himself in the head. She's inconsolable, but I do my best. The police response is quick because they were already there, but I'll never forget her screams or her husband's tears. It wasn't even related to the first call. The medics went in once the scene was secure and deemed the injuries incompatible with life. Who knows what that mother saw, but it sticks with me to this day. I got a dropped call from a house that has no phone. We get a lot of phantom calls from vacant houses, usually due to malfunctions with the phone lines or phone company. Anyway, we got a dropped call from a house with no phone, so officers went to make checks. The house was vacant. Right before they left, they look over at the property next door and see someone who apparently committed suicide hanging in the garage. I received a call from an elderly lady who had trouble breathing. I had taken several calls from her and her husband in the past, so I recognized her voice. I dispatched an ambulance to her residence and held her on the line trying to keep her calm while the ambulance was responding. The ambulance advised that they had a 15-minute ETA. Side note: she lived in a very rural area. So I'm talking to her, asking about her husband and how he was doing, generally just making small talk with her. The ambulance calls in and advises they are on scene. I let them know that she is in severe respiratory distress. I tell her the ambulance is coming to the door and to go answer it. She says okay and hangs up the phone. Here is where it gets weird. The EMT and paramedic on scene call back about a minute later and advises no one is answering the door. We have a sheriff unit who was in the area, pulling on scene about that time. The sheriff unit confirmed the address and advised he is breaching the door to make access to the residence. 5 minutes go by and the paramedic on scene radios in asking who the caller was. I advised it was the elderly female who lived at the residence. He tells me that he's going to call in and needs to speak with the supervisor on shift. We get him over to the supervisor, and the supervisor confirms the information that I gave him and asks what's going on. Apparently, the elderly female had been dead for a while and was already in full rigor mortis. They thought I was wrong on the caller, but the other dispatchers played it back and confirmed that it was the female who called. The ambulance transferred the dead elderly lady to the hospital, and we got the same calls and disbelief from the doctors. So, I took a call from a ghost. When a caller begins with, "I swear I'm not crazy," that's when it's time to buckle up. I have been working as a 911 dispatcher for 22 years. One guy started a call with those words after escaping from his apartment. He insisted his roommates had turned into giant crabs. I did send help for the guy, but it turned out that he was on a bad drug trip. I had a drunk person call to report that he was being harassed at a pizzeria. As it turned out, the cops were already on site and the man wasn't being harassed, he was being arrested for throwing pizza at people. I still laugh about it to this day. I was responding to a domestic disturbance. A woman locked herself in her bathroom, while the husband was on the other side of the door with a gun. He had barricaded himself inside the house. All attending police were in a standoff outside the house. That poor woman was terrified. Every time he started banging on that door, I just knew he was going to break through and get her. This lasted at least an hour. The police officers eventually got him alive. A call came in around 6 a.m. in the morning. 2 teenage kids had gone downstairs to find their father collapsed on the kitchen floor. For the son, he was unconscious, but still breathing. Per protocol, I confirmed their address, sent the case to dispatch, and stayed on the line. I had the kids turn him onto his side, into the recovery position, and I reassured them. For a couple of teens, they really held it together. I told them to monitor his breathing. They said he was still breathing, kind of. And that's when I heard it on the other end of the line. That wasn't breathing. That was the death rattle. Agonal breathing. That was the first time as an EMD, I'd heard that awful rattling sound in a live environment. God help me, may it be my last. In an instant I upgraded the case. This was no longer an unconscious patient, but somebody in cardiac arrest. Dispatch was notified. I saw additional resources being attached. I told the 2 teenagers, in a voice that I hope had even a fraction of composure. I exhibited that they needed to roll their father onto his back, that they needed to commence CPR straight away. I work in a job where you have people in their 20s and 30s, calling you up screaming, hysterical, and utterly inconsolable because of a headache or a cut finger or a sore back. And yet these 2 kids, barely into their teens, were pumping away at their dad's chest without hesitation, working in tandem to perform the best CPR I've ever heard over the phone in my 6 years as an EMD. All I could hear in the background as I helped them keep pace was their father's rattling breathing. I'm not religious, but you can bet I prayed to God Almighty to just let this one live. It was only when the sirens in the background drowned out all other sounds, and the crews confirmed they were at the scene, that I quickly told those kids how proud I was of them and disconnected. I made it a point of mine to never follow up jobs like this, but curiosity eventually got the best of me. I found out a few days later that the guy had passed away. I wish I had never followed up. A wife shot herself in the head. The husband wasn't sure if she was beyond help, so I have him start CPR. At this point, I'm assuming she's gone, but I want to give him something to do, and be able to look back and feel like he did everything he could have to save her. While pumping on her chest, their kid, who was about 10, walks in. The husband starts trying to have the kid help, so I tell the kid to grab a towel and apply pressure to the wound. I'm telling the child to hold pressure on his mom's self-inflicted gunshot to her head, while coaching the father through CPR. The kid was very confused. The husband was about to lose it multiple times. When medics arrived, she was viable. They transported her, and I just assumed she didn't make it, but there's always a chance. We rarely get closure.